Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I'm going to give you my review for the 1973 classic horror film The Exorcist, and this is a film based on a novel by William Peter Blatty, who also wrote the screenplay, which in turn is based on a real life incident that happened in Georgetown during the 1950s to 1960s. And this film was actually helmed by acclaimed documentarian filmmaker William Friedkin, who essentially was hired on that exact purpose by William Peter Blatty himself. And the story of The Exorcist essentially follows two different narratives from two different perspectives. Well, one major narrative, and it's from two different perspectives essentially. You have one perspective which is right front and centre of the narrative, which is Chris Macneil, played by Ellen Burstyn, and she's an actress who, while she's on location to film her latest picture, she and her daughter Regan, played by Linda Blair, are essentially caught in a very bizarre series of events which involves something to do with Regan. She could be ill, she could be, doing all sorts of different things, but it's later revealed that she's possessed. And the interesting thing about all of that is that it's not necessarily confirmed how she gets possessed, but we're led to believe that she might have been playing around with a Ouija board and conversing with an individual who calls themselves Captain Howdy. And there's another character in the film, or there's actually two other characters in the film that do come back into the story later on, but one of the main characters of focus is a man by the name of Damien Karas, who is a psychologist. He's in the priesthood, but he is a psychologist or a therapist who helps priests who are undergoing a struggle with faith or a struggle in their belief in God. He has to put them on the straight and narrow and give them purpose again. But when Damien Karas is faced with this horrific event of what's happening to Regan, he starts to question himself, and of course another thing happens to him, which is that his mother is gravely ill and she ends up being put into a mental institution in which, Damien can no longer take care of her, so he has to put her in a mental institution because he can't afford to put her in an actual hospital, and she later on dies, so that also weighs heavily on his mind as well. So Damien Karas has got a lot of stuff going on, but on top of that he also has to deal with the revelation that he could be dealing with a little girl who is possessed, and this also brings out his questioning of his faith and his justification of how can a God exist when all these horrible things are happening in the world. How can God exist when this horrible thing is happening to this little girl and all these horrible things are happening to this family? So you really do feel the weight of this film. Now, this film has quite the legacy, and a lot of people would say that The Exorcist is one of those films that's sort of the victim of its own success, because if you look on the internet alone, if you were to type on this very platform, YouTube, Exorcist parodies, you would have literally an entire list, about 100 entries or about 1,000 entries of parodies of this film, especially the key possession scenes where there's vomiting pea soup, there's swearing and all these other things. But what's very interesting about The Exorcist is people have often considered it a film that was good at the time, but now it's aged like milk and it's no longer relevant. But I'm one of the very few people who will definitely say that this film still holds up all these years later, because I can remember the first time I saw this film, it was probably one of the most chilling experiences I have ever had watching a film in my entire life. It's one of those films where when you see it, you never forget it. Like, once you see it, you'll never forget it. And it really does feel like one of those films where it definitely feels like an urban legend in the way it kind of presents itself, pretty much in the same vein as something like the Blair Witch Project, where it does stay with you after that initial first viewing. And The Exorcist is really well done because, first of all, like I said, this entire film is not told, it's not to do with Jason or Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers or even Pinhead or Chucky. There's no Dracula, there's no Frankenstein. The main horror of this film is you have a little girl upstairs in her room who is possessed by a demon. And that's all you really need. And even then, if you think the idea is silly or ludicrous, in this film. Yes, you could argue that it is kind of silly, but then part of me feels like the real drama of it, what really makes it work, is they take it so seriously, and they really kind of show that this could happen to anybody. And what I really think makes this film work is that it's told from the perspective of a mum. She is a single mum. She's not only a single mum, but she's also got to deal with a job where it requires her to be away from the house a good portion of time, and she's had to deal with the fact that she's also and let me make this perfectly clear, that the house that she's in for a good portion of the film isn't even her home. It's actually a home that she's staying in, or a house that she's staying in for the duration of the time in which she's meant to be making this film. And that's the whole entire point of it, is she's away from home, she's essentially on holiday, and there's this idea that she kind of doesn't know what's going on with her daughter. She's acting strangely, she's talking back to doctors, she's swearing at them and doing all sorts of horrible things. She's taking her daughter Regan to every single doctor and psychologist known to man, but no one can tell her what's going on. She literally feels so powerless. And when you're a parent, when you have a child, you are basically conditioned from the second your child is born. You make a promise to that child, whether in words or whether through your eyes. You will say to that child, when you're holding that child in your arms, you'll say, I'll always protect you, I'll always try to make you safe. But when you're in a position as a parent where you basically have something happening to your child and you can't protect them, they're in pain, they're screaming, they're doing all sorts of other horrible things that you can't believe is coming out of them and making them feel sad or angry or frustrated or even afraid or scared, you can't protect them. That's a horrible feeling to be in. And when you're a parent, you do feel that anxiety and you do feel that sense of powerlessness because you make that promise to your child when they're born. So the fact that Ellen Burstyn's character of Chris Macneil is in this position where this horrible thing is happening to her daughter and she can't help her, she can't reach out and say everything's going to be okay, she can't make that promise that she made to her when she was a baby of saying, look, I'll always be here for you, I'll always be here to take care of you and I care about you. She can no longer do that because she's now in a position where her daughter is no longer in the realm of reality, she's in the realm of the supernatural. And that's effectively what's really quite terrifying. That's what makes it more human, is you feel like, because it's from the point of view of a mum struggling to make sure that her daughter's alright, it really makes the horror even more powerful because you put yourself in the position of what Chris Macneil is going through in this film and you really do feel her pain. And Ellen Burstyn's performance should have won an Oscar all by itself, because I feel like her performance when she's begging to Damien Karas to help her, and she's like saying she's already seen every damn psychiatrist in the state, like they've all told me to come to you, you're going to send me straight back to them, and she like goes, Jesus Christ, won't someone help me, and she starts to cry, and it really makes you feel sad. Like, you really do genuinely feel for this woman and you really do want her to get the help that she needs. And I think it's that performance that really grounds the horror, and it really kind of makes it feel, it doesn't matter if Regan's possessed, like, yes, that's the main selling point, but the point is that this horrible thing is happening to this little girl and no one can help her, no one can help her out, no one can help her get through this. And she's also struggling to make this film, but then at the same time she's also away from home and she's also divorced, she's raising this daughter all by herself, so she no longer has the father around and she's struggling, like, she really is struggling. So you really do feel like you relate to Regan, and not Regan, but you relate to Chris and what she's going through. So that sells the horror, in my opinion, and it really does make the horror feel more real, and it makes the horror feel more, intimate than it does with, say, for example, Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees. Like, yes, those films are fun, but I think what makes The Exorcist so compelling is it's so grounded. It doesn't matter if you believe in possession, it's the idea of that there's that human element, there's that element of it's a mum going through or it's her daughter going through this and the mum can't help her. It's that stuff that really grounds the horror for me, and it really does make it feel even more intense and even more, heartbreaking. And also, what's also going on, and I think this is another thing that makes the film work, is it's a film about faith that doesn't feel preachy, and I really like that about this film, and I think that's what makes a really good faith film for me. Whenever a film is talking about faith or Christianity or any religion, faith in any religion, it shouldn't have to try to be preachy. It should always try to say that, look, there needs to be a real grounded element to the faith stuff that's going on, and I think The Exorcist really does a good job of making Damien Karas feel like a compelling character, because he, like I said, he is a priest, he's a member of the priesthood, but he's a guy who's a psychologist. He's hired to essentially talk to priests, and whenever they have questions about their faith, whenever they're struggling to find their way in the church or in their faith, he'll always be there to try to steer them in the right direction, guide them on the right path, or shepherd them on the right path, to use biblical analogy. But that's the sort of thing that he does, and when he's in this position where he's not only lost his mum, but he's also had to deal with the fact that he couldn't have supported her, because he's still, training to be a priest, he's still having to go through a lot of stuff. He couldn't afford to keep her in a real hospital, so now he's had to wait for her to go into this ward, this mental ward, or this psychiatric hospital. It's a horrible scene, and it's one of those scenes that really does make me cry, because it's that sense of you can't help them, and you can't help them no matter what you do, no matter what you say. You have to just say, I've got to go now, and it's a really horrible thing, leaving a loved one in a place where they're vulnerable and they feel like they're alone or they're afraid. And that's another human element that works really well with this film, is it really makes the character of the priest, it makes the character of Damien Karas so much more relatable, and it makes it even more heartbreaking when events take a turn for what they are, and they end up, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this film, sorry, spoiler alert for The Exorcist, but when Damien Karas at the end says to the demon, take me, leave this child, take me, I'm stronger, and he's like grabbing hold of Regan, he's like saying to the demon, take me, and he gets possessed, and then he just jumps out the window. That's such a sad moment, because that he's doing it because he's doing what he should be doing, which is that he should be protecting the innocent and using his love of God, his love of his faith, to essentially protect the innocent and stop evil. He's the personification of what the church should be preaching, which is protecting people from evil and not endorsing evil. And that's kind of the thing that really makes it even more heartbreaking. And what's really wonderful about this entire series of events is you just really feel you're on an emotional roller coaster throughout, and I think that's one of the things that's really quite wonderful. And some of the more disturbing scenes, yes, the scenes in the bedroom are horrible, where you're seeing her masturbate with the crucifix, or you're seeing hearing her say things like, your mother sucks cocks in hell, or something like that. Like all these other horrible things, and other horrible things which are far worse, in my opinion. There's a scene during the infamous crucifix scene where she turns her head 360 and she says to Chris Macneil, with blood all over her face, in the demon's voice, "You know what she did, your cunting daughter." That moment was even more shocking to me than the sucks cocks in hell line. That moment was, because it's coming, you kind of think to yourself, oh, okay, that's another, bit of rudeness from Regan. But when she says the line, you know what she did, and she's not speaking, it sounds like the demon's voice, but it's a man's voice, like it's a grown-ass man's voice, and that's even more terrifying, is you're hearing this voice coming out of your daughter's mouth, and it's just such a horrific scene. And that was the moment that really shook me for a while. When I first watched this film years ago, I remember I had to pause it during that scene and take a break, because it was one of those moments. It was like the breakdown scene in Possession, the subway breakdown scene in Possession, where it was so intense and so raw that I had to take a moment after watching it. But it was the same thing with that sequence. But I just really love this film. It's a fantastic example of what happens when you have two really big film directors and producers and writers just coming together and making a masterpiece. And yes, people might say it's dated, but I still think it holds up very well. It's a fabulous piece of Hollywood history. It's a fabulous piece of storytelling. William Peter Blatty should be hella proud. The late great William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin should be hella proud of this film, because this film is amazing. It's a beautiful example of how to do horror well. But even then, a lot of people could argue, oh, it's not technically a horror film. No, this is a horror film, because the idea of an idea to anybody of an innocent child being under harm, or incurring a possession or whatever, that still is a terrifying idea. Ideas are terrifying, and I think that's the thing that really kind of creeps people out. But it's a really compelling piece of cinema. The book is even better. I think the book is really wonderful, and it's just such a fantastic story. And After this, the Exorcist brand kind of went downhill. There was the sequel, Exorcist 2, the Heretic, and that was a load of old rubbish. They essentially tried to do a Doctor Sleep with it, where they tried to have a grown-up Regan come in and have to deal with the demon that came back and possessed her all these years ago. It's a very dated concept, and it's pretty bad. And the only good one out of those sequels is the third one, the one with George C. Scott as Detective Kinderman, Exorcist 3 Legion. That's a really good film. It's a really intense detective story, but it's also very atmospheric. It's very beautifully written, again by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the original screenplay of The Exorcist and also wrote the novel. There's a lot of atmosphere, there's a lot of really good dialogue in that film, and it's just really chilling. It's such a great, and there's a really wonderful scene in the third film that's in a hallway. That's all I'm going to say about it, but there's a really long take, and it goes on for so long you almost feel worn out, and you almost feel like, okay, what's going to happen? But then it completely and utterly just snaps you away with a wonderful use of a snap zoom, and it's so brilliantly done. And it's one of those moments where after you see it, you immediately have to pause the film. It's one of those scenes where if you were watching as like teenagers or as children, if you were to watch that scene and, you know, that moment happens where that big ending, that big climax to that hallway scene happens, you'll be pausing it and looking at each other and saying, let's not speak of this again, kind of thing. It's that kind of chilling effect. It's really well done, and it's a really beautiful piece of filmmaking. It should be taught in film schools, as Mike from Red Letter Media once said. But yeah, it's a wonderful piece. But yeah, this film is fantastic. It's probably one of my favourite horror films to watch during Halloween, but it's also just a really good film to watch any time of year, especially around the autumn. I feel like this is the best film to watch when the autumn's happening, and you're sort of looking at the falling of the leaves, and you're sort of seeing the chill in the air and all the rest of it. Especially when you hear the tubular bells, you really do get that sense of, oh, autumn's coming and it's starting to get colder, and it feels oddly peaceful, because a lot of people associate tubular bells with the scene where Father Maron shows up, and he basically, you know, is walking outside the window, and the poster is, you know, him standing outside the window, and the light from the room is shining on him, and he's in silhouette. A lot of people associate it with that moment, but it's actually played in the film during a moment that's actually quite tranquil and quite peaceful, and it's actually a moment where we actually see Chris Macneil actually happy, and it's really wonderful, and it's just a fantastic film. It's really wonderful. And then of course they made those stupid prequel films which were trying to flesh out Father Maron's relationship with Pazuzu, and it's dumb. Both prequels are really stupid. Hate them. And I just love Father Maron in the original film. Like, I love how he, even though he's this very frail old man, he keeps taking medication that's hidden in his rosary for his heart, but he's a guy who really cares. And even though he's an old man, he still goes all the way to Georgetown to help this mum and her daughter and his old colleague Father Karas to get rid of this demon, to expel this demon. And that's dedication. I don't care how anyone says. If anyone complains that, oh, you're too tired and you're a young person, don't ever complain about being too tired, because honestly, this guy literally flew across the world to save a girl's life. So that's something that you can never complain about. But yeah, I really do love Maron as a character, and I really do think that his lines about him basically saying, one of the scenes that I really do love in the film is a scene that isn't in every theatrical version, which is a scene where Karas and Maron are sitting on the stairs after they've essentially had the big reveal of the exorcism scene, and he goes, why is this happening? Father Karas goes, why is this happening? And he goes, I think the point is to despair. And that's such a wonderful moment, because it's essentially Maron relating to Karas, like, I can see why you would feel this way, I can see why you would want to lose your faith, but you've got to keep strong, you've got to believe in our trust in God, and we can do this. And it's such a wonderful moment. And then Exorcist Believer came along, and it totally ruined it by having a stupid scene where David Gordon Green has Ellen Burstyn as Chris Macneil, reprising her role in probably the role that's made her the most famous. And there's this really stupid scene where she wasn't allowed in the room because, and I quote, the patriarchy, the male patriarchy. And I thought, David Gordon Green, what are you doing? Did you actually watch The Exorcist? Did you actually see what Chris Macneil was going through? Because for one thing, this is also a little bit of a rant on Exorcist Believer. Don't watch it if you're a fan of the original Exorcist film. But yeah, she is absolutely desperate when she hires Karas and Damien. She is absolutely desperate. She is so desperate to get help for her daughter that she's willing to go to anyone. She's willing to go to frauds if necessary, if it means doing something right. But she's very desperate when she goes to Karas, and she is desperate that they perform an exorcism. She doesn't care how long it takes, she needs them there. But the funny thing is, David Gordon Green just basically says, oh, she wasn't allowed up there because of the male patriarchy or whatever. And I thought, that's so a load of bollocks, because first of all, she didn't want to go up there because she was so emotionally distraught. She didn't want to see her daughter look the way she was. Did you see how she looked in the original? She had crucifix scars all over her face and she looks pale as a ghost. And on top of that, she's vomiting, green pea soup in front of priests and swearing at them and sticking her long elongated tongue out at them and things like that. I don't know about you, I'm not a parent, but I would most definitely not want to see my child doing that if I've gone through that much stress. I'd want to stay well the hell out of it. But the fact that David Gordon Green just basically says, okay, we want to throw in a pro-feminist, shove at the original, and I thought, no, these men really risked their lives to save a daughter's life. The fact that Chris Macneil would turn around and say that just feels really out of character, and it goes to show that David Gordon Green does not know. He knows about two things about this film: Jack and shit, and Jack left town years ago. So it just goes to show how much David Gordon Green knows, and I'm very proud of insulting him because he absolutely ruined the character of Ellen Burstyn in that film, and it was horrendous. I hated it. It was awful. And on top of that, there was even a scene where she writes a book about her experiences being a mother of a possessed child, and she even notes the scene where the demons have written "help me," or she's written "help me" on the skin of her belly in her room, and she wasn't in that scene in the original. And I know people might say, oh, she was probably told about it later, but why would she literally say in the film that she witnessed it herself? Like, that's just so stupid. It's such a bizarre scene, and don't even get me started on everything else in this film. I mean, Exorcist Believer is probably the worst one. Yes, the prequels are terrible, both the prequel films are terrible, and yes, Exorcist the Heretic is terrible. But at least those films kind of were admitting that they were kind of, riding off the coattails of the original film. This one just feels like a legacy sequel that didn't need to... Excuse me. This one just felt like a legacy sequel that didn't really need to be made. It just really felt like David Gordon Green wanted to do his version of... But here's the thing, at least... I have a couple of problems with the Halloween trilogy that he did, but at least he felt like a fan who was really... He wanted to write a nice love letter to the original film, and he really did a good job. Yes, he kind of wanks off the original film one too many times, I feel like, but especially with the head tilt stuff with Michael and things like that, I thought, oh, for God's sake, David Gordon Green, stop wanking off the original film for 1 second. Can't you think of anything new for this guy to do? Like, it was one of those things that was really stupid, but even then, it felt like he really loved that original Halloween film. But The Exorcist, it felt like he didn't even see it. It was like he didn't even see the original film. And I watch this film, not every Halloween, but I do watch it every so often whenever I want to, especially around the autumn time where I want to feel, a sense of, wrapping up warm. But I never watch it all the time, but I do feel like it's one of those films that I really do enjoy watching, and it really is a fantastic example of really good horror. But I just feel like this film is genuinely really good, and I feel like when people misrepresent it and misrepresent what it was supposed to be, it kind of makes me feel angry, and it makes me kind of think, okay, at least if you're going to insult something, at least, get the details right. Like, that's the sort of thing that I really do find annoying. So aside from the rant, I think this film's really wonderful, and I do think this film went a little bit over just on my rant of Exorcist Believer alone. But if you're a fan of the original Exorcist, or indeed Exorcist Legion, do not watch Believer. It's stupid, it's dumb, it just feels like David Gordon Green and Andy McBride you know, just basically doing what they did with Halloween, but except there's no passion or love in it. It's essentially just them misrepresenting it and representing all the superficial aspects of the franchise that everyone sort of remembers in passing without actually seeing it, and it just feels really kind of lame and dumb and stupid. And instead of it being a send up to all the positive aspects of religion, it kind of just deliberately throws a lot of shade at Christianity. It just feels kind of like, and in some cases it's justifiably so, I suppose, but in many other cases I think it's completely unjustified. So it just feels like it's misrepresenting a movie, and it's also kind of throwing shade, and it shouldn't need to. But I do feel like one of the most annoying things about requels or legacy sequels is that they just feel very unnecessary. And yeah, the first film's good, second film's terrible, third film's amazing. It's well worth watching. Even if you watch it on its own, it's still great, but even as a sequel to the original, it still feels like it fits in that world. The prequel films are awful, and Exorcist Believer is terrible, and I do believe that if other films were made, they would also be terrible. So yes, don't watch Exorcist Believer is the moral of the story. It's terrible, it's awful, it clearly doesn't understand the characters at all, and it just kind of feels like, oh yeah, we have to throw this in there because people know it from the original film, and it's just dreadful. So yes, please avoid Exorcist Believer like the plague. I hated that line. That line felt like, you know, nails on a chalkboard. That's what that felt like. So yes, this film is Exorcist, the original, is really great, and it's worth checking out, especially around Halloween. But I think it's just such a fantastic film in its own right, and it deserves to be watched and appreciated by a lot of people. And it doesn't deserve just to be dismissed as, you know, dated now or whatever. It doesn't deserve to have that, because it is still relevant to this day. Even if it's not necessarily your idea of scary, it still has things in there to appreciate, I feel like. So yes, I hope you enjoyed my review. I'm sorry I rambled a little bit towards the end and got into a little bit of a rant in regards to all the other sequels, or at least the one, excluding the one good one. I threw a lot of praise at that one. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos, please comment, or please subscribe and comment your thoughts on this film down below. Did you like this film? What did you think of it? And if you want to see more content from me, please subscribe for more. I hope you're having a very good day. Happy Halloween if I don't see you later on, but I have one more video in the works, and I hope you stay tuned for that. Take care, bye for now.